The news of two people, once torn apart by a painful breakup, now quietly tiptoeing their way back to each other, months or even years later, often raises eyebrows among outsiders, especially those with clear heads and rational minds. To them, such a reunion seems immature, even irrational, a decision likely born from sheer loneliness, lingering naivety, or worse, a fleeting craving disguised as love. And so people sigh. Why go back to the chaos you once escaped? Why not be strong and move on? Open your heart to something new, to someone new, or at the very least, get a dog to fill the void. But rushing to conclude that all attempts at reconciliation are mistakes, that too is its own form of naivety. A different kind, shaped not by innocence, but by rigidity, by the blind belief that people are incapable of change. We forget that some truths can only be understood after loss, that some lessons only sink in once we've walked away, and that some hearts only learn how to love right after they've loved wrong. To reject the idea of coming back together is at times to reject the quiet journey of growth that both people may have undertaken. Through late-night conversations that forced them to look inward, through pages of books that cracked open new ways of thinking, through therapy sessions where they sat face to face with their deepest wounds, through travels that stretched not just across geography, but deep into the soul. To say that people cannot change is a kind of despair wrapped in the costume of logic. But to believe that change comes easily, painlessly, without cost, that too is an illusion. The truth lies somewhere in between. And love, if it's brave enough, deserves the chance to exist in that very space in between. Not every reconciliation is proof that love has triumphed. And not every refusal to reunite is a sign of wisdom. The world of emotions doesn't always walk hand in hand with logic, and that's exactly why we need a pause, a tool, a doorway to step back and look more clearly, because for every mistaken reunion, there are also mistaken refusals. Moments when people turn away from what could have been right, simply because they were too afraid of being wrong. Afraid the other person hasn't changed. Afraid their wounds are still raw. Afraid this time is just a prettier version of the same old heartbreak. But if we let fear steer every decision, the door to true healing will always remain shut. To grow in love, sometimes we must learn to distinguish between emotion and evolution, between unconscious longing and intentional understanding. The re-entry exam of life school. No more vague dinner invitations. No more casual reunions that melt into the night as if pain never existed. From now on, whenever one of you asks, "Should we meet up for dinner?" the standard answer should be, "Let's take the re-entry exam of life school first." This exam isn't a lighthearted chat in a quiet cafe. It might take up to 7 hours across 5 separate meetings and include input from 2 of your closest friends, the kind honest enough to see every shadow, and loving enough to speak the truth. Not to assign blame, not to hunt for who was wrong, but so both of you can bravely sit with the things that once couldn't be said aloud. A reunion is only truly worth it when both are willing to face their own shortcomings, both can tolerate the discomfort of revisiting painful memories, both choose wisdom and maturity over fleeting emotions. We stop repeating old wounds only when we are brave enough to look pain in the eye, clearly and consciously. No denial, no romanticizing, no self-delusion that this time everything will be fine. When two people can sit together amid the ashes of what once broke them, not to let the old fire reignite the hurt, but to use its light to illuminate the present. That's the true sign that love may be rebuilt, this time with a stronger foundation. Of course, there will always be those who choose to sidestep the real questions, dodging them with pleasant, easy answers. There will always be those who say, "I've changed," when deep inside, nothing has truly shifted. But even that, the need to lie in order to keep going, is already a clear sign. This test isn't about love, it's about growth. The real question is this: have we, each of us, become better versions of ourselves since the last time we were together? Have our tempers softened? Have we learned to listen, not just with our ears, but with the quiet inside us? Have we discovered how to love without suffocating? And if the answer is no, then maybe this love is meant to remain in the past. Many will hold on to the memories, We used to be so in sync. We almost had a child together. We still know each other's nicknames, how the other likes their morning coffee. They still look beautiful sitting across from me. All of that. Yes, it's beautiful. It's real. But it's not enough. The only valid reason to return is because both people walked away from the breakup with real lessons learned. Not out of loneliness, not out of habit, not because the silence got too loud, but because each of you has learned how to love better. And now comes the small but incredibly brave thing we must do. Instead of just feeling that we've changed, can we clearly express how? Not just a casual, I'm different now, but a detailed, honest, drawn-out conversation about lessons learned, about the mistakes made, and most importantly, about what we've done to make sure we don't repeat them. The skeptics will always say, anyone can say they've changed. That's the easy part. What matters is, can you prove it? And they're not wrong. True change doesn't live in words. It lives in this: your ability to sit down and hear someone recall the things that once hurt you and not react the way the old you once did. Someone might ask, do we really need to talk this much? The answer is yes, and the more, the better. We don't talk just to hear each other's voices. We talk to see ourselves more clearly through the eyes of the other. Only those who are willing to spend 5-10 hours digging deep into their own minds and listening, truly listening, to the mind of the other, have even the slightest chance of building something new. It's not easy to use words to describe our own foolishness. It's not easy to say, I was immature, I was stubborn, I lied, I pretended to be strong when I was just scared. And it's not easy to sit still while someone recounts the pain you once caused them. But if two people can do this, honestly, without blame, then that's not just courage. It's a sign of growing wisdom and a love that is beginning to mature. On the other hand, if someone avoids these conversations by saying, I'm not good with words, I'm not used to talking about feelings, I love you, but I don't know how to express it, then please be honest with yourself. They're not ready. And maybe, just maybe, they're not deserving of a second chance. We don't blame them for not yet knowing how to express their heart. But that doesn't mean we should hand it back to them, only for it to break again the same way. Love that cannot speak, that cannot listen, that cannot sit in silence and truly feel, is forever a half-finished love. And let us also remind ourselves, this test is not a promise, not a commitment. It guarantees nothing. It offers no happy ending. It is simply a deep dive into what was never said. Sometimes, after everything, both people will walk away, empty-handed but clear-headed. And that is still a result worth honoring. We often argue not because we hate each other, but because the heart is trying to protect something it once held dear. We argue because we're afraid of stumbling again in the same place. And sometimes, we argue because we don't know any other way to say, I still care. Some people choose to remember their past love through a sad song, a page from an old journal. They close their eyes and dream of the sweet days without daring to look back at the pain that followed. They build a safer version of their ex in their minds, an idealized version because it feels less dangerous. But if you truly want to go back, if you want to step into a new chapter without drowning in the old one, there is no other way. You must look directly and seriously at the only thing worth facing. What made that relationship fall apart in the first place? And you know what? If you still can't answer that, maybe you're not ready to love again. We cannot re-enter a relationship with hearts full only of sweet memories. If we truly want to begin a new chapter, the first step is to name what once felt like a nightmare. All the pain we buried, all the wounds that still quietly bleed, all the things that make us shiver at the mere mention. That's where we must begin. The continuation of a relationship doesn't hinge on how much we love each other, but on how brave we are to dig into the reasons it once fell apart. We must be honest enough to ask, what did I do wrong? What couldn't I change? And can that truly be accepted? How do we face the unchangeable parts of each other? This is not a negotiation to exchange beautiful promises, because when promises break, they often hurt more than the raw truth. We don't need ideal expectations. We need realistic ones. If I'm someone who easily loses my temper, I cannot say, I'll never get angry again. I have to say, I'll try to recognize it before it rises. And if I can't stop it, I'll walk away, not lash out at you. Real courage is facing the parts of ourselves we cannot fix and learning how to live with them without hurting others. Because the truth is, almost no one can change completely. We will still be who we are, with our warmth and with our edges. But what matters is, are we aware of the sharp edges? And do we have a plan to keep them from cutting someone we love again? We need to ask plainly, what makes me hard to live with? What about me made the other person feel suffocated? What kind of problems do I bring into the relationship? And more importantly, have I learned how to regulate myself? Or am I still expecting the other person to just endure me like before? We don't need perfection in our partner, but we need them to be deeply aware of their imperfections and how those imperfections ripple into the person beside them. Truly kind people are not those who are always pleasant, but those who know when they are not and have learned how to either rein it in or apologize when they fail. A relationship reborn doesn't grow from pretty wishes. It grows from brave clarity. Clarity that refuses to love with eyes closed. Courage that refuses to carry forward unhealed wounds. Nếu bạn muốn tiếp tục gửi phần sau, mình sẽ luôn sẵn sàng dịch theo phong cách nhất quán như trên. Dưới đây là bản dịch tiếng Anh chuẩn văn phòng Mỹ, giữ nguyên cảm xúc sâu sắc và mạch liên kết. There's an uncomfortable question, but it holds the key to any chance of beginning again. What kind of trouble did I bring into the relationship? How hard was I to live with? In what ways did I even unintentionally cause suffocation? This isn't about self-blame. It's about naming the darkness so it no longer controls how we love. Both people need to pause, not to argue, but to write down their own truths. Each person should put in writing what they see in themselves and then let the other read and reflect. The more overlap in perception, the fewer pointless arguments in the future. Because at that point, critique stops feeling like attack and becomes part of the shared project of loving. We also need to ask ourselves something much bigger. Was all the sadness I felt really caused by them? Or beneath it all, were there old wounds I had carried long before they entered my life? Were there waves of anxiety, feelings of emptiness, sorrows that made no sense, that never went away even after they were gone? When we're in the thick of a relationship, it's easy to assume all pain comes from the other person. But distance teaches us something important. Some of that pain was already ours. And if we don't tend to it, we'll carry it into every relationship that follows. They weren't perfect, but they didn't deserve to carry the full weight of our unhealed trauma. They were not the root of all our suffering. Sometimes we were the ones keeping ourselves locked inside unnamed wounds. Then time passes and something shifts. We begin to see that the things we once took for granted have become quietly, profoundly precious. The patient gaze they gave when you lost your temper, the apology they offered, even when they weren't at fault. That small habit once ignored, now the thing you miss most. Absence becomes the test of gratitude, and time, if given enough of it, grants us a more generous, balanced view of the person who once stood beside us. You may have met new people. You may have tried opening your heart again. And strangely, that may be what made something even clearer. Not everyone listens to you like they did. Not everyone holds space for your cracks the way they once did. Not everyone touches the deepest part of your soul the way they somehow did. This doesn't necessarily mean you should go back, but it is a sign of something else. You're beginning to step out of your old ego and into a territory called humility. And in that space, a new relationship, even with an old love, might finally be built on something real. Awareness, not illusion. Presence, not fantasy. Healing, not... There's an uncomfortable question, but it holds the key to any chance of beginning again. What kind of trouble did I bring into the relationship? How hard was I to live with? In what ways did I, even unintentionally, cause pain or suffocation? This isn't about self-blame. It's about naming the darkness so it no longer controls how we love. Both people need to pause, not to argue, but to write down their own truths. Each person should put in writing what they see in themselves, and then let the other read and reflect. The more overlap in perception, the fewer pointless arguments in the future. Because at that point, critique stops feeling like attack and becomes part of the shared project of loving. We also need to ask ourselves something much bigger. Was all the sadness I felt really caused by them? Or beneath it all? Were there old wounds I had carried long before they entered my life? Were there waves of anxiety, feelings of emptiness, sorrows that made no sense, that never went away even after they were gone? When we're in the thick of a relationship, it's easy to assume all pain comes from the other person. But distance teaches us something important. Some of that pain was already ours. And if we don't tend to it, we'll carry it into every relationship that follows. They weren't perfect, but they didn't deserve to carry the full weight of our unhealed trauma. They were not the root of all our suffering. Sometimes, we were the ones keeping ourselves locked inside unnamed wounds. Then time passes and something shifts. We begin to see that the things we once took for granted have become quietly, profoundly precious. The patient gaze they gave when you lost your temper, the apology they offered even when they weren't at fault. That small habit, once ignored, now the thing you miss most. Absence becomes the test of gratitude. And time, if given enough of it, grants us a more generous, balanced view of the person who once stood beside us. You may have met new people. You may have tried opening your heart again. And strangely, that may be what made something even clearer. Not everyone listens to you like they did. Not everyone holds space for your cracks the way they once did. Not everyone touches the deepest part of your soul the way they somehow did. This doesn't necessarily mean you should go back, but it is a sign of something else. You're beginning to step out of your old ego and into a territory called humility. And in that space, a new relationship, even with an old love, might finally be built on something real. Awareness, not illusion. Presence, not fantasy. Healing, not habit. Sometimes life is cruel, but also strangely fair, if you're patient enough to face the very things that once broke you. Before holding hands again, two people must first sit down and ask each other, what have we learned from failure, from bad dates, from long, aching nights alone? We cannot go back just because we feel something. Emotions rise fast and fade just as quickly. But unhealed wounds, if not addressed at the root, will return, often in a new form, and this time, possibly more terrifying. What will the next argument look like? Will the next disappointment feel any different? Or will we fall into the same patterns because we didn't actually learn anything? Imagine 6 possible conflict scenarios ahead. 1. Another party you're not invited to. 2. Work is just too busy again. 3. You're exhausted and shut down. 4. They're jealous over a glance. 5. You feel misunderstood. 6. They feel you've changed. Then sit together and ask, how will we respond differently next time? How will diplomacy replace destruction? This can't be just a 2-person conversation. You need someone else in the room, a trusted friend who saw everything when the relationship fell apart. The tears, the anger, the faint glimmers of hope. They're not your enemy, but they're also not clouded by longing. They're the clear-eyed witness, the one who will lovingly ask the hard question, is this relationship still worth rebuilding, or is it best left behind? That friend should meet privately with your ex and offer an honest evaluation, not built on promises, but on actual awareness. Do they truly understand the damage they caused? Have they genuinely changed or just learned better lines? How do they respond to uncomfortable questions? Are they defensive or are they listening? Can they stay calm under emotional pressure? What do they admire about you? And is it anything deep? And finally, is getting back together the right thing or just a softer version of the same old pain? We so often make the biggest decisions of our lives because of one lonely night, one unsent message, or a song that made our chest ache. But love should never be decided in moments of weakness. It deserves to be chosen by a heart that has grown wiser, a mind that understands what enough really means, and a soul that is no longer blind. And if, after all of this, both people still choose each other, not for nostalgia, but for a deeper, clearer understanding of themselves and one another, then maybe, just maybe, this love truly has a chance, this time, to live again in a way that is right and beautifully real.